record, which I can't. There you go. All right. So I expect there'll be some other people joining us because we don't have quite as many as had accepted the appointment or registered, but we will plow ahead. And I think with a group this small, we will probably have time for questions at the end quite easily. So we'll clip through this and then kind of get to questions after I've gone through it all. So this is part of the 2024 Missouri Oral Health Policy Conference. Hope to see you all there. In fact, it's a pretty good chance you will be there. And of course, my computer's going to not agree with me about something. Let me see here. There we go. So this is our advocacy skill development working with legislators plus. There's a few comments about working with other folks on here, but it is being recorded, as you just saw a minute ago. So with that, I'll start walking through all of this. Oh, and I am Gary Harbison, the Executive Director. I think probably everybody on here knows me already. And then Ashley Herman, also with the coalition, is here today. So we are a nonprofit advocacy agency. It's really a statewide network of advocates working to improve Missouri's oral health, primarily through systems change and policy. Our mission is to improve oral health with all Missourians by advocating for sound public policy. And our vision is oral health for all Missourians. These are all of our current policy goals. We have a policy committee chaired by a board member. Goals are generally recommended there and developed there and then recommended to the board. They do have to be approved by the board for them to be adopted. So I'm not going to read through all this, but you have a lot to work with here in these, I believe, 11 goals. And at any given moment, we're probably not working on all of them. We're working on 3 or 4 at any given time, but there's a lot of relevant material in here. Even still, I mean, the fourth one down on the left side, improvement in Mo Health Net by implementing best practices and system improvements to increase provider participation in Mo Health Net participant usage. That's something we're working pretty heavily on right now. We support SDF. That's probably the most specific goal on here. We want to expand coverage and access to silver-diamine fluoride for all Missourians. So those are just a few examples, and you've probably been reading a little bit while I've been talking. So advocacy. I know most people on here are probably well-versed, and I know some people on here are extremely well-versed, but advocacy is really just raising awareness about an issue that is important to you. Contacts with state and federal legislators, city council members, county commission members, elected and appointed government members of any kind show that oral health is important to you and to Missouri, and therefore it's very important to do that. Advocacy can also be about specifically requesting an action, such as passing a law, funding a project or program, or changing a regulation. So that one sentence there where you're asking about something very specific, please support this law, for example, that's more typically what people think about in terms of advocacy. But I think, really anytime you talk with an elected or appointed official about oral health and you're interested in Missouri oral health, you really are advocating for them to consider that issue important and to look at it. The sentence also, it talks about you can be working about a law or funding a project or a program or changing a regulation. It isn't always that you pass laws. Sometimes it's a regulatory change that is needed, and that happens more at a different level than the state legislature. So very much, again, decision makers need to know that oral health is important to Missourians and important to you. And really, without people speaking up about this stuff, it's very, very easy for decision makers to forget about oral health. It is a problem that oral health suffers from. It's considered sort of a second tier, and by some people, an unimportant area. And these contacts are very important because it makes it hard for people to say, yeah, that doesn't matter, because you're showing that it matters. Before making contact with a decision maker, do some background research. You can find a lot of information online. You really want to know what's of interest to the decision maker. And then it'll help you understand what their priorities are. With our senators and representatives at the state level, you can look them all up. You can find out their committee assignments, the legislation they have filed. You can get a bio, a photo, it tells you their address and room number in the Capitol and their phone number. And so you can really find a lot of good information online. And for somebody that you're completely unfamiliar with and have no connections with, doing all of that is especially important. And then I just wanted to stress, how much your voice matters. Most decision makers understand that they are working in a government position to serve the public interest, elected or otherwise. So in that sense, they're very happy to hear from you and hear about your interests. I said most because occasionally we do run into legislators that are completely uninterested in hearing from constituents. That's an unfortunate occurrence. Hopefully that will not happen to you. I don't know of anyone right now that would fall into that category, but if you get that kind of response that pretty much tells you they don't care, my recommendation would be to disengage from the conversation, go talk to somebody that is interested. And again, most legislators would be very happy to meet with you. They actually, I feel like a lot of times they like visits. And I also think you should think of your contact in terms of longevity. Making a connection now can help later. So if you develop a little bit of a friendship with somebody, that's all for the good. I also, want you to understand your voice as an individual citizen actually can carry more weight than lobbyist or professional advocacy staff. Because they know that you're up there as a volunteer and you wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't important to you. And I think most legislators, they want to hear from citizens. They want to know what's important to you. And it will shape their activities from there. When you talk with legislators, there's some very simple guidelines with this. Introduce yourself and say that you're with the Missouri Coalition for Oral Health. Be sure to refer to legislators as Senator X or Representative X. Legislators really do expect to be asked to do something. Typically, they're listening for that. They're used to that. And so you don't need to be shy about saying support such and such bill. They expect you to do that. And so it's a normal part of that relationship between constituents and legislators. The Capitol building is, generally speaking, a pretty active and even noisy place. So you shouldn't expect interruptions. That's just kind of part of the environment up there. I mean, on a Wednesday during session, you're going to have all sorts of people taking tours, school children, various groups doing their lobby days. And sometimes there's days where there's a bunch of people with displays, particularly up on the third floor. And it just, all those voices echo through all those hard surfaces, and it's a loud place. So. And also keep in mind that legislators often have a lot of issues running through their head when you're talking to them. And they may even just talk to you about something that you're not there for because it's important to them. And that, I think that's fine. Just wait patiently and come back to your topic. I will say, if you want to engage with them on issues not related to coalition priorities, try to segregate that a little bit in the conversation so you're making clear that you're now speaking as an individual rather than part of the conversation. But you do need to be aware that your conversation on unrelated issue may have an impact on a conversation about oral health. So you have to use your best judgment about those kinds of things. But it's not unusual at all for legislators to bring up topics, what they're working on now. They're human beings, things they're irritated about, things they want to accomplish, all those kinds of things. And don't worry about not getting the legislator, talking with the LA or the legislative assistant or other staff or interns can be just as beneficial, sometimes even more. The LA in particular can really keep things on track. So if you get attached to an LA and they're really zoned in on what you're talking about, I think that's very good. And I wouldn't feel bad about missing the actual legislator. The staff members can really make sure your issue is raised and remembered. You may get questions that you can't answer. That's fine. Don't try to fake your way through it. Just say, I don't know the answer to that. And then we'll have a feedback survey or form. And if you could kind of note that on there, especially if we need to do follow-up. And then I would add, making a connection on a personal level on something that maybe isn't policy related. There's nothing wrong like that. Like, oh, I grew up in Pacific and you did too. That's great. We went to the same school, even though it was different times. Those kinds of things are great, just like making connections with anybody. Always remember to be polite and thank them for their time. And one rule, don't call those LA's secretaries. They actually are not secretaries. They're legislative assistants, and that's something very different. I think it's always good to write to legislators because most of the time now people are using email. But if you write a letter, especially a handwritten letter, that's really going to stand out. I would just urge you to, be clear and to the point. Try not to ramble on. Do an introduction, and then let us know if you get a response, particularly if there's any follow-up that needs to happen. Always be polite. And you may include information about our 2024 legislative priorities, which we'll get to right now. So we do have several pieces of legislation in play right now. I would say the piece that has some legs is the dental and dental hygienist compact. So there are two identical pieces of legislation. One is Senate Bill 778, Senator Esslinger. That has had committee assignment. It had the public hearing, and it has been passed by the committee. And that is where it is right now, and it's kind of stalled out. As you may or may not know, the Senate is getting pretty heavily bogged down by the activities of what is known as the Freedom Caucus. And so like these more typical bills are not moving forward. There's concerns about the state budget, to be honest with you. So we don't know where that bill is going to go at this point. They do have a lot of pressure on them, however, to pass the state budget. So at some point, I think things will clear up and start moving again. On the House side, 2075 by Representative Jeff Coleman, that has moved on, and they've done a little piece with this. It's now called a consent bill. That makes it, I won't get into the technicality of that, but it makes it more likely that it would be passed. And of course, then it'll have to go over to the Senate. Now, if the Senate bill were passed by the Senate, I believe, and then the House has completely passed the bill, I believe we're done, because unless there's some language differences that I'm not aware of. So we're actually seeing this stuff move. There's been some good work on the part of several lobbyists working on this and really done an excellent job. This bill also had a committee assignment and a public hearing. I testified for both of these bills for the coalition. Diane Baumkamp was there and testified in favor of them. For MDHA, MDA was in the room and testified in favor. There was no opposition to either bill that I know of. Excuse me. So we also have House Bill 1621. This is a bill we had filed last year. And actually, there were some earlier versions. Excuse me again. It did go to a hearing last year. It's really about supporting local decision making by ensuring that when they're looking at public water fluoridation, that they're getting information from the local health departments. It's been first and second read. It hasn't had committee assignment. It looks to me like this bill is not going to move. And then there's Senate Bill 1215. Oh, and there's a reason I think it probably won't move. There is a rule that each committee can only forward 2 pieces of legislation. So that's pretty restrictive in terms of the number of bills. And they started that rule last session. You know, a little atypical. There's usually a bunch more legislation that comes through. So, but I think for these bills that are not big priority for anyone in particular, on the leadership side, it makes it less likely that they're going to move. Senator Roberts has filed Senate Bill 1215. This would allow dentists to administer vaccines. This was filed last year. It did go to public hearing. There was some active opposition to it. So it was filed again this year, and it really isn't, does not appear to be moving at this point. So when you go out in the Capitol, you'll hear me say this several times, but let us know about legislative contact by filling out the feedback form and turning it in at the conference registration desk at the hotel. I also believe we'll be giving you a link that'll probably go out before before March 7th when you go out, so you can fill it out online instead of the paper. Paper's fine though. I'll have paper copies up there at the Capitol, and you can fill them out while you're in the Capitol and turn them in at the registration at the hotel, the conference registration at the hotel. I do want to encourage you to consider setting appointments with your senator and representative, but at the same time, that doesn't mean you're going to get to see them, even if you have an appointment. That happens all the time. And then sometimes you walk in and you get them. It's just kind of the flow of things. How many hearings are they holding that morning that your senator or rep wants to be involved in? Again, if you end up with the LA or a staff member, that's fine. It's not unusual for people to have an appointment. They go to the office of the senator or rep at the appointed time, and they find the door locked. You just have to come back later. That's part of the going with the flow up there. It is also not terribly unusual for the LA to pull, our staffer to pull the legislator off the floor to speak with a constituent, off the floor of the House or the Senate. It's more common on the House side, but you know, I find that a little less conducive to conversation because they're stepping out into the hallway and it's noisy. You'll have to use your discretion and consider the timing. Typically, they go into session about 10, so we're kind of running in the 8 to 10 slot that morning. But there are committee meetings there. They might take you to a committee room and pull them out of the committee for a few minutes to talk in the hallway. That's probably a little bit better than being pulled off the floor of the House or Senate. But just to let you know that that does occur, you can even request it if you want to. That doesn't mean they'll do it. But my own preference is I'm not crazy about those hallway conversations just because they're short and they're it's distracting. The noise level is distracting, but you know, just to let you know that can happen. If you're comfortable with it, do it. Also considering your time up in the building, it's fine to go visit other legislators besides your own. We provided you with a list, and there are some notations of people that are on important committees and people that we have reason to believe are supportive of oral health policy. It's very good to, you know, walk in, ask to speak to them. Again, you might just get the staff person or the LA, but there's nothing wrong with those random things. They have that happen all the time, and it'll be up to them to tell you, no, we're not going to do that, or yes, we are. So we provided you with what we call the MCOH overview. It's a very brief document. You can leave that with the offices. Um, and you'll have the legislative priorities too. You can leave those as well. And, you know, just because we expect some of those bills to not move, there's no reason to not ask for them to support them, because maybe next year it'll be different and we'll be able to get some movement on that. This is an election year, so everything's kind of influenced by that because people are in election mode. Sometimes that means people are competing with each other, and you know, that's just part of the environment. But this document, going back to the overview, it serves to establish that oral health is important as a policy issue, that oral health policy can and should be addressed by policymakers, and that oral health is of interest as a policy issue to many organizations and individuals. I think the logos on the back of that one-page document are extremely helpful because they show that there is a breadth and depth of organizations involved in the coalition, and that creates leverage and interest. So sometimes I hand it to people with just the logo side showing. So I'm going to go into some logistical things, and then we will go back to questions. I did want to mention one other thing. It's really not on our priorities, but there are a couple of pieces of the budget that are oral health related. One of them is that they are looking at increasing the Medicaid rates for extractions and sedation. Those were not picked up when the rates went up to 80% of UCR. And so they're coming back, and that was recommended by social services to the governor's office. The governor put it in his budget recommendations. There was a budget meeting this week. They did talk about it. It seemed very positive. There was no one saying this is a bad idea or anything. So we hope to see that go through. Budget starts on the House side and goes through the Budget Committee, full House, and then over to the Senate, usually with some sort of reconciliation joint committee at the end because things don't match up exactly. So logistics, parking's not great. Just plan ahead. There is circle parking. You might get lucky and get a 3-hour free parking spot in the circle around the Capitol. Maybe not. There's metered parking in a lot of places downtown. Some are only 1 hour, so you really got to watch those signs. There's definitely parking places where you are not welcome to park. So read the signs. I think in relatively short distance, you could typically find some parking that is longer term, and you know, the walk's not bad. But long story short, it may just be easier for you to walk up from the DoubleTree. It's a little bit of a hike. Part of it's uphill, so there is that. But there's going to be free parking at the hotel. This year, they're telling us the garage will be open even for people who are not staying at the hotel. And we're trying to work with Jeff City to reserve some spots out on the street in the vicinity of the hotel where you can park. So that may be just an easier option to hoof it up there and give yourself time to do that and then plan on walking back. You can get parking around the Capitol. I usually find it, but I usually get there early. Yeah, so I mean, you just have to watch where you're parking, what the meter time is, and all that. And it really depends upon how busy the day is. If you have a very large group there for a meeting or a demonstration or whatever, or for legislative day, it'll get proportionally more difficult to find close parking. You will enter the Capitol through the doors under the stairs on the south side. By the south side, I mean opposite of the river, and with the Supreme Court on the across the street. So that's the High Street side. Watch for signs. You'll go underneath those big outside stairs. You will go through security down there. It's similar to airport security, so you need to allow a little extra time. And again, if there's a big group there, it will take you relatively longer to get through that. Once you're through security, you can find elevators near the ends of each hallway to your right or left. If you don't find it, keep walking. You'll eventually come around to an elevator. There's what they call a governor's elevator right across where if you walked out of security, went through the center dome and onto the other side, you would find a smaller elevator over there. I wouldn't recommend using that one, but I did want you to know that there's another elevator there. You can also access stairs. You come out of security, you walk forward, you turn right or left, you will see stairs that go back up over almost over where you were when you came in security, and you can take those stairs up to the other floors. There is a Missouri State Museum tour desk right in front of you when you come out of security. Just right across the hallway. There's very easy to see. I wanted to note that they have maps that can be helpful to you. It's a kind of a brochure shaped thing. That's that picture I have on there. And that can give you a good layout of the building. Now, we did send maps out to you, Capitol maps, but that brochure is handy, and they're typically just like setting out there on the desktop. And I think you can go up there and get one. And they also have legislator lists, both the representatives and senators, and those have room numbers on them. So that can be helpful to you too. You can ask them, they really are Missouri State Museum tour guides. You can ask for assistance about finding things and such, but they're really there for the history more so than anything else. I just wanted to share this map with you. High Street and through here. Can you all see my cursor? Ashley, can they see my cursor moving?
Yes, they should be able to see it.
Okay, so that's High Street. The river's up over here. Circle Drive, there is 3-hour parking at various places around there. There's metered parking along Broadway. I think it's only 2. Over here, you're going to find a lot of 1-hour parking. I mean, there's different parking situations all the way around. Down by the Jefferson Landing historic site, there's some 10-hour parking along there, but that's pretty rare to find one of those open, so I wouldn't even recommend looking there. I put the star way down in the corner across from Madison Cafe and the Governor building. At the corner of Madison and East Capitol, there is a parking garage. It's not a bad walk. You can almost always get parking in there. Kind of down a hill and then up a hill. So just general layout here. East, Senate side. West, House side. Riverside. Generally, that's where you're going to find the Republican Party folks, and then Democrats more so over on this side. This is the front. You will walk under there to do the entry. I know that was quick, but that's kind of how things lay it out for you. This is a map of the 3rd floor. The legislative library there at the top of the screen, that is the the riverside or north side. And so the Senate's to the right, the House is to the left. You got the Senate Lounge on one end, the House Lounge is the Thomas Hart Benton mural there on the left. The grand inside is what's called the grand staircase, and there's these alcoves on either side, and we'll be on the Senate alcove on the Senate side. A lot of people have trouble seeing those when they're walking around and going down the hallway and stuff. But that is where I will be. I will be in that alcove. And you'll find me there for a couple of hours. And I'll have materials and all that kind of stuff. And certainly if you have questions, you can reach me. So I should be up there by 8 o'clock, and I'll be there for 90 minutes, 2 hours. And then we'll have copies of the priorities, the MCOH overview, the legislative feedback form. Watch for a link to that form later around that day. And then legislature usually goes into session at 10 a.m. So that's not a bad time to call it quits, especially since the conference starts at 10:30. So good time to get on out of there. I wanted to urge you to do some follow through. Personal notes are just really, really great. I think they make a great impression. Again, handwritten, short little cards. Thanks for meeting with me to talk about the importance of passage of whatever. That they will pay attention, and put the date. I was there on March 7th. Great meeting you. You do want to, you can find the addresses on the House and Senate websites, but you do want to address those letters in a fairly formal way. So the Honorable Senator XX, Senate State Room, and then you can find the room number online, and Jefferson City, Missouri 65109. So that's important to get the address proper. And you can always drop us a line at info@oralhealthmissouri.org about any of those. So we have made it to the discussion section, and Ashley, I don't know if you wanted to jump in there with a few things.
Sure. So Gary kind of went through some of the logistics and things that you can expect. We really want to turn the floor over to you guys now to be able to ask questions if it's your first time going, if you've been multiple times, to provide insight of some of your experiences. So we just wanted to provide a couple of questions to kind of jog some thoughts to get ideas going. What concerns might you have in regards to talking with your elected officials? Or maybe what are some successes and challenges that you've had in previous legislative visits that you'd like to share with the group? How can we as MCOH better assist you with your advocacy outreach efforts? So we'll open the floor for questions here in just a second. If you want to be able to speak, just use the raise hand feature and we will unmute you. Since this is a webinar, we kind of have to set it up that way. So I will go ahead and start looking for people who would like to speak. And Gary, there is a note in the chat from Diane if you wanted to see that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to tap on. So Diane, who has been up to the Capitol far more times than I, is giving a correction that I misinformed you about where the Republicans are on the House side. She says they're actually in the front of the Capitol side in the House. And Democrats are on the riverside.
Diane, is it okay?
In terms of getting them out of off the House floor. Yes, that's a thing too, is sort of which side you have to go to for whom. Generally, I wouldn't try that trick without getting an LA or staff to help you, and they should take you to the right door. That's good though, Diane.
Diane, is it okay if I unmute you to share your experiences? Diane, I went ahead and unmuted you. I know you've done this several times. If you want to share a couple of your insights of experiences that you have, I think that'd be beneficial for the group.
Can you hear me? Can you?
Yes.
We can, yep.
Okay, yeah, and then also on the Senate side, if you have to get them out of the session, you go by where they're sitting in their chamber. You can get a map usually at the information desk on the first floor rotunda, right in the middle. As you go in, you can kind of see right in the middle, there's an information desk. They have lots of maps and stuff like Gary was talking about. And a lot of times too, if you make appointments ahead of time, if you're making them early, you probably will go right to their offices. But if you're going later in the day, some of them will say, well, I'll pull them off the floor for you, the legislative assistants. They may do it for you. But other times you might have to kind of, if you can't get to somebody, you can't make an appointment. If you go up to one of those doors, if it's the Republican side, for instance, you'd go on that, like I said, the front of the Capitol or the south side, go on that door on the House side, and you knock on the door and the doorman will ask you whom you'd like to see, and they will get them for you. And then if they're busy, they'll say, I can't come right now. I'm listening to a bill, or I'm, presenting a bill or whatever. So they're usually pretty nice about it, especially if you're from their district. They're going to be a lot nicer. But probably if you can make that appointment ahead of time, that's a smarter way to go.
Mary, what do you want me to point out on the map? The I'm not sure. Can you type a little bit more? Tell me what you're after there. Or maybe Diane just cleared it up for you. I don't know.
Maybe it was the doors.
It might have been the north versus the south, Gary.
Oh, okay. Well, let me see what I can do about getting. Yeah, it's kind of at an angle. Anyway, oh boy, I tell you what, this software gets trickier every day.
Mary, we went ahead and let you have access to your microphone if you want to unmute and ask your question.
How about this? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Gary, hi.
Hi.
Hi. I have the maps in front of me. I downloaded, I printed out some of the things that you had on the site that we were going to talk about today. And you had one of the maps up as you were explaining which side was the Republican, which side was the Senate. So as I'm looking at my map, I was wanting to know if you could just show me what map again you were referring to, so I walk in the right place. That's all.
Well, you're probably going to be better off sticking with room numbers to find people, especially on the first floor, because there is not enough space in the Capitol. So you actually walk into these areas where they have their legislative offices, and where it used to be, just one floor with a big tall ceiling. Now you walk in and there'll be representatives underneath in their offices, but then you go upstairs and they've added a whole other layer. And that's even a little confusing with the room number, because then you have to walk in and ask somebody, where is representative so and so. So I would try to use those room numbers as much as you can. But yes, generally speaking, as far as room assignment goes, on that north or riverside, that's generally the Republican Party. And of course, it changes every year. That's the other thing. If you visited somebody before, they may have a different room. That's, you have to check. And then generally the Democrats are on this side in terms of room assignments, which, as Diane pointed out, is different than what might be going on the way the House chamber is organized itself. So
Okay, then I won't worry. I won't worry about it. I got
yeah,
everything
I
I
would
need.
check ahead.
Okay.
If you want to visit and get those room numbers, and then give yourself enough time to walk around a little bit. I mean, that's one thing I'll say about the Capitol. You are going to be walking. That is definitely going to be part of the process.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Yeah, go ahead,
Diane.
Diane.
I was just gonna say, as you go into the Capitol from the front in that little carriage entrance, generally speaking, not all the time, but most of the time, you'll find the Senate is definitely on the right side. And generally, if you go left, would be the House side. But like Gary said, there are a few little House offices that might be a little bit on the right, particularly on that first floor, because of, like you said, lack of, once in a while, there'll be some in the, like in the middle too. I don't know, I haven't been to those lately, but if you go right, when you go into the Capitol, that's generally toward the Senate side, particularly when you get to the second and third, fourth floor. And on the fourth floor, it's goofy because you can't get to the, on the fourth floor from the Senate to the House side. So you have to go down the stairs to get to the third floor to get all the way through. So it's a little convoluted, but you can always ask the guy at the front desk or go into someone's office and say, I'm lost. Could you please help me? And they're lovely. They're very nice people there.
Yeah, and you know, the other thing, there's some foibles about the Capitol. One of them is what Diane just mentioned, going up to go back down. But when you're like walking that rectangle on any of the floors, it gets it starts all looking the same, and you know, there are windows in the corners, but you kind of have to go into a little alcove to even look out to figure out where you are. So again, those room numbers are just getting around. It's much better to have those room numbers with you and then look accordingly. And Diane, you're absolutely right. People will help you. You can walk into those offices and then generally somebody will say, oh yeah, that's down this way. So, but it is confusing. Easy to forget which end of the building you're on or where you're going. And there are those interior offices, Diane. Those are a little bit of a stumper to me. I mean, it's like they're just shoved here and there. Other questions or comments? Well, apparently I did just a brilliant job then.
Hey, Gary, I will say one thing if it's okay.
Sure.
If you go in there, if it's before session and you're there, a lot of times they will have time to talk to you, but if they don't, you want to have your little spiel ready ahead of time, because it might be that you get 3 sentences.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll get more than that, probably 8 o'clock in the morning, but if they have a hearing or something going on, you know, they're gonna be busy and they're not gonna have a lot of time, so try to
Yeah.
have your thoughts organized ahead of time and your little piece of paper or anything that you want to emphasize ready. And then it'll work out much better for you. And just say, make sure you have, if you have a business card, give it to them and say, this is how you contact me if you have more questions. And if I don't know an answer, I'll find out and get back to you, or, you know, something like that. Cause, you know, you always want to get back to them if they have a question, because it might be something important.
Yeah, and they'll remember you better if there's a follow-up. And don't be too frustrated if you don't get your 3 sentences out too, because I mean, I've had appointments with people, they invite me into their office, I sit down, hello, and then somebody runs in the room with something else that they have to deal with, and then, you know, 15 minutes later, you're still waiting to have the conversation, and other people are coming for their appointments. It's just the nature of the environment. It's just the way it is. It's a highly dynamic environment.
And I'd also like to just say, if it's your first couple of times going, don't let it intimidate you. At the end of the day, they are still people just like you and I. They still want to have a conversation with you, and they're just in a different type of job than you are. But they do want to hear from you. They want to know what you have to say, and they do hold you as a subject matter expert.
Yeah.
So just have the conversation.
And you know, I can't emphasize enough that it does matter when you go up there and talk to people about issues. You might think, you know, they're not really going to listen to me, but they will, especially if they're hearing very similar or the same messages from other people. They're like, wow, this is an issue that people are up here talking to me about. it must be important. I'm gonna have to find out about that, even if they know zero or don't care about oral health, when they get people coming in there talking to them, it does make a difference. And as far as just talking to him, yeah, I mean, especially get on the Senate side, they have pretty nice offices. They look a little intimidating. But it's really no different than talking to your neighbor or anybody else, they're just, Ashley's right, they're just human beings, and chances are they do want to hear from you, and they will listen to you and pay attention to what you're saying, even if they disagree with you, which that's going to happen too, probably.
And I know that there will be several people during the day that, have done it multiple times, have only been up there a couple times. If you want to ask Gary to kind of help connect you with a more senior and seasoned advocate, feel free to have that conversation and just go in and observe if it's your first time going.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're not going to have a huge group up there, but that is absolutely a thing to do, is just go, I'm just going to go along for the ride, see what happens. And by the way, you're all here today, and that's great, but there will be people that show up that are not on the webinar today and are there, and some of them will have a great deal of experience. So it might be pretty easy to pair up with somebody up there. I will say a lot of people have trouble finding that Senate side alcove by the grand staircase on the third floor. So give yourself time to find that. Or you can come in the building already paired with somebody, and you're good.
Gary, we had a comment in the chat. Do you have any ideas on talking points for Senate Bill 1215?
So I'm sorry, I don't remember which one is 1215. Which bill is that? I need to pull up my list here.
The vaccine one.
Well, I think just generally the kinds of things that have been pushed on with that bill is it makes perfectly good sense for dentists to be able to deliver vaccines for their patients, and it's a convenience for the patient. They know how to use needles. They numb people by sticking needles in their gums. I mean, I've kind of said that myself, is like, I'm sure someone who can put a needle in my gums can competently give me a vaccination in my arm. I'm not going to be too worried about that. However, I really think this bill isn't. I would be very surprised to see it move this year. I think even the people that were pressing on it last year are not really asking to do much with it this year. So, but I mean, I would keep it really basic, and it's really mostly just a convenience for patients. They're in already for a dental appointment. Now there is another connector there, and that is the HPV vaccination, because it's the oral health professionals who are going to be watching out for impact to oral health and are interested in that. And it really makes sense for them to be able to give that vaccination. That's a little bit more technical, but Merle's probably going to give us the answer to that. If we can you unmute him? I can't even find him on the list.
You should be good to unmute, Merle.
We good to go now?
Yes.
Okay. I would just make it real brief. Obviously we our dentists are used to doing injections all day, every day when they're working. Probably the main point that I would make, though, within the mouth where we do injections, there's a lot more nerves, a lot more blood vessels, a lot more things that we are aware of, as opposed to popping it in a muscle in the arm. So, short and sweet, just like we're certainly used to dealing with areas that are a lot more technique sensitive than what a vaccine might be.
Yeah, very good point. Like, you're not dodging cranial nerves when you're giving somebody a vaccination in their shoulder. So yeah, short and sweet. And again, it's a good thing to take these bills and look them up before you go up there to see if there's been any action on it. I just don't expect that that bill is gonna get any traction this session. Could be wrong, you never know. But especially the way the Senate is right now, it's still good to talk about these things though, because there's always next session. Is there another state where immunizations are approved in dental settings? I feel like I am not an expert on that, but I am thinking that Oregon may have done that. Merle, do you know, Dr. Nunemaker?
Diane just probably had a good answer right there on the chat.
Yeah. Yeah, that is
So,
good.
yeah, how many states, I have no idea, haven't looked at it, but Diane's probably well versed in that, so.
Diane, I don't know if you wanted to make a comment. I don't know if we can unmute you. There you
Yeah, I don't know about the dentist. I just knew the hygienists were able to do it in like 20 states. So I figured if the hygienist could do it, they probably allowed the dentist to do it. One would think, right?
Yeah, I'm sure that's the case.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the pandemic really made things very, very different, and there were a lot of openings for these sort of things. Whether or not that time period is completely passed, I don't know. Time will tell. But yeah, I do think, however, there was one state that just permanently allowed dentists, but I'm not. Don't quote me on that. In spite of the fact that we're recording this.
Yeah, I was thinking it could be Oregon or Washington, but again, I'm not 100% certain on that. Mary, that'd be something that you'd have to look up. We're not 100% certain on if that's a permanent or a temporary. Do we have any other questions, thoughts, concerns, fears about going into the Capitol, what to expect?
I mean, I'll just throw out there. I mean, I know there's people on here very experienced with going up and talking to legislators and people at the local level, city council members and all of that, county commissions. But you know, I think it is a little intimidating to go talk to an elected official. Yeah, for most people, there's a little bit of nervousness with it, and I think even people with experience, depending on who they're talking to, they might feel a little nervous. You know, just let that be part of it. Don't expect yourself to be perfect. I don't think anybody's perfect at these interactions. It's, you know, talking to elected officials is a very human thing to do, and you know, it's gonna be imperfect. Don't worry about it. There's so much going on in that building. You could probably stand on your head in the hallway, and they'd be talking about it for like 20 seconds, and then they wouldn't even care. It would never be mentioned again. So, not that I'm encouraging acting out in the state capitol.
Just as we're starting to wrap up, I just wanted to make mention that we'll have a follow-up email that'll come out hopefully later today with the recording, as well as the handouts again, in case you have misplaced those from the previous email. And if you have any questions at all up until Legislative Awareness Day, you can email the info account or Gary, and we can get those answered for you and help to make sure that you're as well prepared as possible.
And Diane says it looks like there's 8 states according to the ADA website. So she looked it up. That's good. Well, any other questions or comments? Good humor for the day. I don't know where you all are in the state, but we have blizzard-like conditions currently in Jefferson City, and the roadways are unpleasant. And I suspect that is the case in many areas, at least through the central part of the state. So if you go out, be safe, be careful. And thanks for being on here today. I look forward to seeing you on the 7th. and at the conference on the 7th and 8th, and it's going to be a good time. So I'm glad you all are coming. Snowing in St. Louis, I see. All right. Thank you all very much. Have a great day.